Hey everybody, this is Rob Gauthier, the ET Whisperer. How you guys doing out there tonight? I just wanted to stop in for a minute, check up with you guys, see how you're doing. I know I haven't dropped as many videos. There's been a lot of changes, and a lot of it's had to do with our booking and scheduling. But this specific video, I really wanted to share about astrology here. Now, Treb and Aridif have talked about it many times in many channelings, and the basic mainframe of their perspectives on astrology is that it's not some practice to use that creates a reading of the force of energy that the universe uses to mold you and to force your life or your experience. It's basically a way to reflect the internal energy from you to the cosmos out. What's within is without, what's inside is outside, what is inside you is always projected into reality outside of you. So if that's the case, then obviously the cosmos is going to be the macro to what you are in the micro. That's an important thing. People who tap into astrology can really tap in to the energetics of the co-creation and the creations of the moment. Beautifully done. I believe that certain astrologers channel this information from their higher self. Yes, any astrologer can go into a book, read about the placements, the degrees, the houses, the ascendant signs, all of these different aspects of astrology, but not everybody can pick these things up in the chart so beautifully and kind of channel what that means from their own perspective of the energy. There are many astrologers out there, and I resonate with probably less than 5 to 10% of them. Of course, a lot of those that I don't resonate with because of their belief. Their belief is that this is finite, and although you have control of your actions, you're destined to be put in this box of energy, labelized in this way, that way, or this way, and there's nothing you could do to get out of it type thing. As you guys know, coming from listening to Treb and Aridif, totally not in alignment with those things. My alignment is that we all have free will, that the free will is a part of a desire from the larger part of our souls, oversouls, Earth Collective, Galactic Collective, Solar System Collective, to bring about an experience that only you can do. And we localize that in a smaller fractal consciousness, a physical body, a personalized lifestyle, and come in with these great stories, reflections of energies, and all this stuff so that we could be a different character for the play that is life. This is another point of energy that's so contentious in our community. A lot of people take that black and white and they're like, oh, a bus full of children just flew off the cliff. That's okay. They chose to be here. They chose to die that way. They're creating this with no sympathy, empathy, or feeling about that experience. And that is where I'm drastically different from a lot of the people in our community. I believe that we should feel something for that we shouldn't be dismissive of horrible, bad experiences that people go through, because that is how we know that we're in line with ourselves, is when we can feel what's going on in other people. And that's why psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists all have a degreeing scale of separation from everyone else. And I think our community does tend to bring in a lot of narcissists and a lot of people who are in the sociopathic spectrum of energy. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, that's an experience too, and that's a valid experience for a soul to have. But what I'm saying, to cut off your emotional ties from bad things that go on in people's life, in my opinion, that's horribly misguided in the understanding of how we come here to create. We're not here to just play a play and that's it. Of course, on a greater scale, sure. That's the idea. We all come in to play our parts, and after we're done, we go back to the oneness, but we're not in oneness right now. We're in Earth. Earth is separation. Earth is that guidance away from oneness, a purposeful guidance, but still a guidance away from oneness in a separate illusion, in this big experience of creating with other people, so that we can understand different aspects of reality. We're in the most dense, and we're moving out of it piece by piece, but we're in the most dense now and learning to be who we are, and that's a beautiful thing. That aside, guys, I wanted to bring up astrology because I just have recently had a reading done. It's the very first reading I've ever paid for out of pocket in my whole life. I've never bought astrology because it never tends to be important for me. It never tends to be something where I feel like I would want to give away my energy to see what someone else says. But Kalina had found this astrologer years ago and had been following his work for a long time. Me being exposed to everything she looks at and watches, I heard. And I started listening to this guy and was amazed by his accuracy, his grounded approach to astrology. I mean, just like in our community, there's a ton of different people. Bless them all, love them all. I'm glad they're here. I'm glad they're going through experience. But there are a lot of ungrounded people in our community in general. And when you have someone who can take this very etheric energy, this very macrocosmic, multi-dimensional energy, and they can bring it down into the world in a way that's understandable, practical, useful, grounded in earth energy, that is what I love. And that is what I love because it encompasses what I am, what I do, what I think, how I feel. And this was a reason I resonated with this guy. This guy's amazing. By far one of my favorites that I've ever bumped into. So it's great. Now, Kalina's had exposure to astrology her whole life. Her godfather and godmother are both very famous astrologers. Her godfather is actually the man who invented the software that you use when you're on a computer. When you type in your birth date, your location, your year, that little wheel that comes up with all the lines, yeah, that's her godfather who invented that. He was the first one to use that technology in his practice of astrology. Still very famous, still on YouTube, still does videos, great guy. But Rick, he goes over my whole chart knowing nothing about me except for my email. There's a footer that says, ET Whisper, please keep this email private, blah, 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 blah. If any of you got an email, you know exactly what they see. ET Whisper. That's the only thing he knew about me, and it's because I used my work email instead of my personal one because I was paying for it with that email, so I figured it would be important to contact him. So that's literally all he knew about me. So this guy has no prior knowledge of me or what I do besides just the name ET Whisperer. And that's an important part too, because I actually enjoy this guy because he says that a lot of things in our community that are ungrounded and that are too metaphysical, new agey, aren't really useful in a lot of ways. And I don't think that that's correct. I think everything has a use. But I understand the desire so strongly as a person to not want to make sure that your information is not so off-grounded or out of reality that it's hard for people to connect to. And I think that's what links me to this guy the most, is that common bond of wanting to take these very etherical topics and make them palatable to people, observable by people, and also taking things that are extremely weird, like channeling, and bringing the source of information through my channeling that can be comprehensible, that can be usable and grounded. But anyway, I want to give you that information beforehand so that you guys can look at this, look at it objectively. Some of you know me well. Some of you only know me from YouTube or only have heard me talk on YouTube a couple times. Some of you, this might be your second video of me you've ever seen. You might have seen like Interview with Ed and this, or maybe you saw the interview with Lee Harris and this, and that's all. So it might not be as powerful for you if you don't know at least something about who I am and my story. But I really believe that if everyone checks this specific video out, that it can be useful when I talk to Treb and Aridif about astrology and have them chat about that at a later time. So anyway, guys, please enjoy. This is something I never do. I don't, I've shared my story before, but I don't bring my personal day-to-day life into the collective. But I think this is an important thing for people to see, because you can understand how something abstract that you might not think is grounded in reality, or the physics of it doesn't work, or the metaphysics of it doesn't work. I've got to admit this. Before I met Kalina, I knew astrology had a reflective purpose, and that was it. I never cared for it. I always thought that some of the people in were too hokey. I thought that a lot of people invested a lot of faith in a lot of things that they didn't need to, because you create your own reality, and why would you need the stars to tell you that they can't tell you anything, because you're just going to create around it or through it, or use that as a belief to mark your way out of creating something else that's better. So I always was really skeptical about astrology, and the more that Treb and R have talked to me about it and showed me that it was just that macro versus micro reflection, and showed me how that the universe itself, the stars in the sky, the planets, our Earth, the moon, that all of these things are literally embedded in all of us. And because that large thing is a part of us inside of our tiny little specks of consciousness, that means that those are projections of us too. That is amazing. That is something that shows fractalization of consciousness more than anything ever could. This is the pure example of mathematics, of geometry, of the energetic creation between macro, micro, all the way. So anyway, guys, I'm going to shut up. Enjoy this, guys. I love you guys so much. Love you guys, and I'll see you on the other side.
Hey there, Rob. Welcome to your astrology report. And once again, thank you so much for your patience on this. I really appreciate, you being so easygoing about it. Thank you. I'm going to be starting with your report first, and then I'll do your wife's report secondly, a second report I'll send. So let's start with yours. And I want to start with your birth chart and go over it briefly the way that I see it. And then we'll look at your transits and your progressions, which will show us where you are right now in the big picture and where you're headed. And I definitely see a lot to tell you about for your progress chart and your transits. So that will be the second half of this report. But let's start here with your birth chart. I've been looking it over and trying to figure it out here. It's a very interesting chart you have. You actually have a lot of Earth energy, because you have all these planets. You have Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn all in Virgo, and you also are Virgo rising, plus you have a North Node destiny in Virgo. So Virgo is going to be a very important energy for you to embrace in this life, and I'm going to get into how I see that for you in one second here. And then you also have the Capricorn vibe, which is also Earth energy, and you have Mercury and the Sun in Capricorn. So the Earth is about practical things, down to earth things, but your chart is much more complicated than just that. You also have, I'm just going to point out a few of these aspects, and then I'll get into, explaining what it all means here. You also have this very other aspect that's very different from the Earth side of yourself, and that is Venus and the Moon opposite of each other in Aquarius and Leo. And this is a very different energy than the Earth. So you're not just one thing. You're a complicated person with a lot of different energies that all combine to make you a very unique individual, as we all are. But let me try to go through all this and tell you how I kind of look at this. So I think it'd be best to start with the South Node placement of Pisces. So I do see, on your emails, I do see the I don't know what it's all about. But based on what I've seen so far, you do have this connection to an ET whisperer. I'm assuming that's like a connection that you have to something above and beyond. And I do see that in your chart. So we will get to all that. And I don't know anything else about you besides what I saw in your email there, which is fine, because maybe you can get some additional insights, by me not knowing too much about you. But what I see here is that your South Node in Pisces, I always look at the South Node placement as something we've done already, something our soul is really good at and is mastered in prior lifetimes. And my astrological philosophy is based on past lifetimes, many different lives that we've lived. And, Rob, this character is just one lifetime out of many. And there's deeper energies about you on a soul level. And that's what I look at with that South Node of what you've already done and mastered. So Pisces is what you've already done and mastered. And you also have Pisces on the 7th house cusp of other people, including relationships and partnerships. So on one hand, this would mean that you have a connection to other people from prior lifetimes. And a lot of people that come into your life, including your partners, are going to be karmic people from prior lifetimes as well that you already have a soul connection with. And then the other side of it is that Pisces is the metaphysical energy. Pisces rules everything that's above and, well, it has a connection to things that are above and beyond, but it kind of is the natural ruler of the 12th house. And the 12th house is it's a psychological house. It's a house that's connected to the collective consciousness in a way. It's connected to other dimensions. Everything that's it's not as solid. Pisces is not solid energy, which is the opposite of that is Virgo, which is the earth energy that is more solid. But the Pisces vibe is more about, spirituality. It's about everything that's hidden and secret and other dimensions, psychic energy. Pisces definitely rules psychic energy. So if you have a connection, in that way, I think that's a part of the connection, that you have this mastery from prior lifetimes of all the things that aren't solid, all the other dimensional realities of life. And so that's like the foundation, in a lot of ways of a soul kind of mastery that you have on that level. Now it's going to get complicated because, the way I look at the nodes of fate here is that you are not meant to just fully be in that Pisces realms. You have to do it differently in this lifetime. And the difference is the opposite polarity, which is the Virgo energy. Your North Node of destiny is in the sign of Virgo, opposite of all that old ancient stuff from prior lifetimes that's more psychic and intuitive and spiritual and metaphysical and, all those types of things. So the way I look at this is that you're being asked to take all that soul wisdom that you have around those metaphysical type of things and do something practical with it in this life. You can't just get lost in those other dimensions and just travel around and, you know what I mean? You have to work with it in a practical way. And that's what the earth energy is all about. And you have so much of that Virgo that's pushing you into this path in this lifetime of developing the sign of Virgo. And so it's your destiny, it's your rising sign, and you have 3 major planets in Virgo. So this is huge for you to be developing this Virgo energy. And Virgo is the sign of service, work and service. It's about practical service, mundane, everyday life work and service for other people in some way. And Virgo is also about, like I said, the details and narrowing the focus and sorting everything out, figuring out what goes where and how to decipher things and where it goes and put it in its proper place. And so in a way, the Pisces stuff is more hard to figure out. The Pisces side is, like I said, it's not as solid, it's mystical, it's even it's kind of, it can take on any shape in a way. And so you have to sort all that out. You have to take all that soul energy and sort it out in a practical, organized way in this lifetime. And then also, work with it in a way that makes a difference. So again, it's not a placement where you're supposed to just get lost in psychic, intuitive, metaphysical energy and just kind of not do much with it. You have to actually do something with this energy and make it useful for other people in some way. So that's a major part of your destiny. Now, with that said, the North Node is on the 12th house side. And the 12th house is a lot like Pisces in a way. So it's not like you're supposed to totally let go of that Pisces energy that your soul has this mastery of. It's just you have to work with it differently in this life. And honestly, you're probably already doing that. At your age now, you're roughly 41-ish, it looks like. So you're headed into your 40s now. You're headed for your second half of life. You're actually in a transition period from age 40 to 45 called the Midlife Transition. And once you get through that transition after age 45, you're going to be fully in your second half of life. And I believe this is where your true mastery shines at its brightest and best, in your second half of life, because you also have the planet Saturn in Virgo in the first house of self. And anything in the first house is more powerful than other placements. It's the most powerful position in the chart, which you have Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn there. But Saturn is a planet of delay sometimes. It takes time to really mature into its best energy. So there can be, hard knocks in the first half of life at times with Saturn in the first. There can be pressure, work, just it's more of the hard energy. And when you get to your second half of life, which you're now in that transition to, then Saturn fully matures. You know yourself better. You're more experienced, and life can just be easier. You can work with your energies better in your second half of life, in my opinion. But you're already kind of naturally someone of wisdom. You're someone of an authority figure, because you also have Saturn in the first house that says you're an authority for what you do. So what's interesting, though, about this Virgo, it's kind of, there's even a health component potentially. I also think you need to take really good care of yourself in this life and have a special routine for yourself. Sometimes Virgo risings need a special diet. It's not just about what's healthy or not healthy. It's about what fits your body, because Virgo needs usually something more detailed and focused on the self, that's special for the self, to take good care of yourself. And there is some health stuff wrapped up in all this in some form. The sixth house is also the house of health. And you do have energy there, and I see this area of your chart really highlighted in this phase of your life. We're going to talk about that in your transits and your progressions. But there is something about health here too, whether it be for yourself or working in a health context, or even this practical, spiritual kind of work you do may also have some sort of a health component to it. Maybe it's more of spiritual health or psychological health for people or something like that. But it does feel like there could be a health component in all this. Now, with that said, Mars is rising pretty much perfectly. It's one of your strongest planets on the ascendant. So Mars is the planet of action and passion and moving life forward. Now, Mars in Virgo is more humble. It's more practical, but it's very powerful in the first house of self, which says you need to pioneer your path. You don't necessarily need to be a follower in this life. You probably are more of a leader, with Mars rising, and you need to have the capability of figuring out a plan, following a plan, moving yourself forward, pioneering your path, being your own person, developing some level of freedom and independence for what you do in this life as well, with Mars rising. Now, in your chart, Mars is the planet that rules your third house of Scorpio, where you have this very interesting placement of Uranus there. And then Mars is the ruler of your eighth house, which is also a house that's a lot like Scorpio. So what this Mars is saying is that Mars is bringing the energy of your third house and your eighth house front and center for you to be working with. And the third house is the house of communications. And it's the intellect and the mind and the communications. And you have Uranus there. And Uranus, I believe this is also a part of your ET connection kind of energy, because it is the house of communications, and Uranus is about everything that's taboo, everything that's different, especially in Scorpio, because Scorpio rules what's hidden, it rules the occult, what's hidden, what's secret, what's under the surface, what's deep, what's scary. It's Scorpio, and we're in Scorpio season right now. It highlights everything that people don't want to talk about. So you have the energy of what people normally, normal mainstream society typically doesn't want to talk about. And plus, adding Uranus there, what you communicate is different. It's unusual. It's outside the box. It's tabooish. It's kind of deep and intense and powerful. And so that's a major energy for your communications, is talking about what's hidden and secret. And that comes, again, that's ruled by Mars front and center. So that secret energy of Scorpio becomes very out in the open for you to express yourself with, because the first house of self is you and how you express. Now, the fact that Mars is in Virgo, which rules all that hidden, deep stuff, it's like, okay, now in Virgo, you have to sort it all out. You have to, it may, like, the communication that you have a connection to, I would imagine that it's not a straightforward word by word kind of situation. It's more like you have to decipher it, you have to interpret it perhaps, get to the details, figure it all out, and that's what Virgo is all about. And then Mars ruling the 8th house, again, the 8th house is a lot like Scorpio. It's a hidden house. It's a house of secrets and death and all the deeper things like Scorpio. Now for you, it's Aries. But the 8th house is also the house of partnership, money, shared resources. So it's also a financial house, which is meaning that other people's money is front and center for you as well, and having that communication connection. So that's a big thing. And then having Jupiter there in Virgo. Now this is a little bit of a challenging position for Jupiter. Jupiter is a planet of abundance and growth and expansion, belief, truth, what's real. Now, your Jupiter is retrograde, which means that it was closer to the Earth when you were born than normal. So Jupiter was closer, it was brighter, it was more powerful. It wasn't at its most brightest point until the sun reached Pisces, but it was still pretty bright, still pretty close. But the retrograde means that your belief systems and what you find to be truth in this life is probably going to be different than the average mainstream person, because the retrograde just shows that your beliefs or your truth goes against the grain of the mainstream. And then the other part about Jupiter in Virgo is that Jupiter is big, it's huge. It wants to expand things largely. But Virgo is a very small space, and it's narrowed. And so Jupiter has a hard time with, Jupiter is also about philosophy, wisdom, knowledge, truth, all these things that are above and beyond. So take all those big things that are above and beyond and then put it in a very small space of Virgo, and you have to sort it out. And it's not always easy because you have so much wisdom, knowledge, truth, above and beyond information that it's hard to fit in this practical lower level way. But that's what you're here to do. That's what you're working with. And but it's a little more challenging. Also, it's sometimes it's not always easy to expand largely and fast and in a bigger way, because again, Jupiter is in a small space that can only expand so far. And then Saturn there, it can also be, this is a pretty intense lineup actually, Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn all together in the first house. It's actually pretty powerful, but it's Virgo. It's done in practical ways. But it's not as practical as other Virgos, because your Neptune down here in the 4th house of home and family, it's the foundation of life. This is where you have Sagittarius energy and Neptune. So this is a belief. This is spirituality, faith. This is metaphysics. Neptune is a lot like that Pisces vibe, and Neptune is at odds with all your Virgo. It's considered a square. So you have Neptune square Saturn, Neptune square Mars, and a wide orb square to Jupiter. And what this means is there's some tension in your chart based on what's practical, what's organized, what's detailed and grounded and logical, versus what's metaphysical, what our belief, are, things that aren't as solid, which you have at the foundation of your chart, the fourth house. So that might have a connection to home, family life. Sometimes Neptune can be our blind spots, though, too. And being in the fourth house, there can be something unknown or missing or confusing about the home and the family in childhood or something, and or sometimes it can create a spiritual, religious family, or there's a lot of different possibilities for that, but it's more of a spiritual, bigger energy versus what you're here to do in this life is to bring it all down to earth and arrange it all in its proper place and figure everything out. And so that does add a lot of tension, but at the same time, it's also a part of a psychic, intuitive energy, that you have a connection to at the base. It's like the root, a deep root that's connected to what's above and beyond and spiritual, metaphysical, and intuitive and psychic. And it's also a very idealistic energy. So having Neptune square Saturn is like hardcore reality on the earth plane of a reality. What, like physics and, like gravity, it's like Saturn is our reality here on earth. And Neptune is the reality of other dimensions. And so those two are at odds with each other in your chart. What's real on earth, but what's real in those other dimensions, they're in conflict with each other. And so in this life, you have to work with both. You have to take this metaphysical, spiritual, psychic, intuitive energy and really work with it in a down-to-earth, practical way. And that's going to be the best way to work with all this type of other dimensional stuff you have going on. So with that said, now we can, let's say, because you're Virgo rising, that means that the most important planet that represents you is the planet of Mercury. You're ruled by the planet of Mercury. And your Mercury is in Capricorn, which you have Capricorn on the 5th house. So this means that you are a Mercury person. And Mercury also rules Gemini, which you have on your 10th house of the public and your career, you could say, or your reputation, what you're known for, what you do out in the world, vocation and all that. It's Gemini, also ruled by Mercury. So this means that Mercury is a very, very important planet for you, for both yourself and your professional life. And having Gemini on the 10th house of the public, Gemini is about, first of all, it's about communications and information. So right off the bat, that shows that your professional life can go a long way in a communication, either speaking, writing, just communicating generally. And then Gemini is also about duality. So doing more than one thing, multitasking, doing a variety of stuff. And that all comes back down to this Mercury here, which is you and your professional life in Capricorn, and the 5th house. That's where you have your sun as well. So the sun represents your purpose, your focus, your identity, and it's right next to that Mercury. So again, being a communicator, a writer, a speaker, a performer even in some context, because I see another area that I'll be talking about in a minute. But the 5th house, so it's both the 4th house and the 5th house that your chart ruler and your sun comes to. The 4th house says that a part of your life is going to be about home and family as well. And you could even potentially work from home. I'm not saying that that's your only option, but working from home or having an office in the home or something like that could work for you, because your professional planet comes to the home and the family. And that's usually a sign a person can work from home. But then the 5th house connection, the 5th house is actually about creativity. Well, the 5th house has a few different meanings. So one big meaning for the 5th house is creativity. Now yours is Capricorn, so it's a little different than the average creative energy. But there's still going to be probably a creative component to your purpose in this life. And so the 5th house rules creativity, it rules joy, happiness, fun, recreation, parties, and then it also rules children. So all those different things could have a connection to a part of your path in this life of what you do, what you focus on. So children are going to be a part of your path most likely in this life in a major way. And then also a creative business, because Capricorn is a business energy. Again, it's an earth sign. It's about what's practical. It's about achieving things. It's about respect. And, Capricorn isn't the easiest energy. And plus, it's ruled by Saturn, which is in your first house. So I don't think your life has always been necessarily easy. I think you've had some hard knocks through the years, but it's also a part of your wisdom and your authority of who you are. But I would say that, with Virgo rising and Capricorn on the 5th, it's like you could find fun and joy through a creative business for what you do, which again is going to be likely something that you own, something that's independent, because that creative business comes back to Saturn in the first house of self with Mars that wants to pioneer and be independent in what you do. But normally this would indicate that you are creative. You could be a creative writer, creative speaker, or any kind of creative business that's connected to all this other stuff that I've been explaining. And then children, like I said, and joy and happiness, that should be something that you're trying to develop in this life, is following your heart, following your path and your passion and what you really enjoy doing. That's the 5th house. And children can also be a source of joy and happiness. Now, this energy wasn't always easy because you've been going through a Pluto transit through Capricorn since 2008. And several years back, Pluto was moving across your sun. So it hasn't always been easy. But luckily, your Capricorn is in great alignment with your Virgo because they're both earth signs. You even have what we call a grand trine here. Well, we could even call it a kite, where you have these different sections of your chart all connecting in a positive, easy way, which is normally an indication of a gift that a person has. When a person has a grand trine, they have some sort of a special gift. For you, it's connected to the self, it's connected to a creative business, and the other side of it is Chiron on the 9th house. And this 9th house is being activated right now as well, which we'll be talking about here in a second. The 9th house is the house of, again, it's a spiritual house. It's what's above and beyond. It's an education house. It rules publishing, broadcasting, anything online, anything that has a global audience. That would be the 9th house. Now, Chiron is what we call the wounded healer placement. Chiron is about wounds and sensitivities. And so you do have some sort of a gift for a healing ability in some way that's connected to a creative business, writing, speaking, publishing, broadcasting, sorting things out, getting to the details of things, organizing things. So what you do, for whatever reason, it has a healing effect on you and other people. Now, I'm not sure if it's directly, I'm not sure if it's like a health profession necessarily that you're connected to, but whether you're trying or whether you're conscious of it or not, what you do in those regards does have some sort of a healing effect on yourself and other people. So it's kind of a gift. And you just have this great alignment for yourself too with this Capricorn energy. You also have what we call a finger of God aspect, and that's this arrow that's pointed right to your sun, the green line. It's like an arrow. So that's why we call it a finger of God. It's a karmic aspect that's kind of outside of our control. That's like a touch of God, you could say, fated. And it's connected to your public life of your career, what you do, communications, and it's connected to your moon, which I haven't even talked about yet. That's a whole kind of separate energy about yourself. Your moon in Leo, that's connected to the 12th house. And so there's this, again, there's something fateful about a creative business connected to the public. For whatever you can take that to mean. So let's start talking about this other position of your moon opposite Venus. This is very interesting. So having a Leo moon, that is a totally different energy from all this other Earth energy that I was explaining. Like Capricorn. Typically, Capricorn is like the energy of reputation, respect, authority, playing by the rules, of society and all that. And it's just more practical, more humble, more down to earth. But your moon in Leo is totally separate. The moon is your emotions, your feelings. The moon represents how you feel on the inside, whereas the sun is more of your physical identity of a Capricorn. But your internal nature is more of this Leo moon that has the Venus opposition. So the moon in Leo for you, it's a little more complicated because your Leo is the 12th house. And again, the 12th house is a lot like that Pisces vibe that you have a connection to from prior lifetimes. The 12th house rules other dimensions. It rules everything that's secret and weird and hidden and hard to understand. It's behind the scenes energy. It is kind of a hard house typically. It's not known as being an easy house because the 12th house rules suffering and loss and confusion. Sometimes it's wrapped up in drugs or alcohol, or sometimes Pisces and the 12th house has a connection to addictions. And I'm not saying necessarily you've had those issues, but sometimes people that have really strong psychic intuitive connections, early in life, it can be overwhelming for people. And they don't always want to recognize it or acknowledge it. And it can be too much, an energetic sensitivity of some kind for people with your type of a placement. And so that can sometimes lead to people numbing it down through some form of escapism tendencies. So sometimes in the beginning of life, it can be hard. People can get wrapped up and get lost, and, they don't own their gifts quite fully yet. And so that's why, again, the older that people get with this type of energy, the better they know themselves and the better they can work with it. So sometimes it can be a very challenging house, very psychological, other dimensional. It can also be an isolated place, sometimes feeling like prison. It does actually rule prisons, but it can be also like self-imprisonment or being stuck in your own internal prison of some kind at times. But the moon in Leo is actually a position that wants to express itself. It's a creative energy. Now, your sun is also focused on the 5th house, which is the normal Leo house. So there is a strong, creative, expressive part about you. And that's what you need emotionally to feel good in this life, is to express yourself creatively. And the moon in Leo, it's good. It's a good energy for getting attention, getting recognition, getting the spotlight, performing, entertaining, anything in those realms. But yours is more private. It's behind the scenes. It's kind of hidden. It's not out there in the open as much. So that's where it probably gets channeled through communications, expressing yourself creatively through, writing, speaking, publishing, broadcasting, all these types of things can go a long way in emotionally fulfilling you. And then Leo, it's ruled by the sun. So your sun in Capricorn is actually the energy that is working for this 12th house behind the scenes, energy that's connected to everything out there in other dimensions and stuff. But the Venus opposition, that's different, because the 6th house, where Venus is on the cusp of, the 6th house is a practical house. It's a lot like Virgo as well, but for you it's Aquarius, which is group and community energy. And Venus also rules women, females, beauty. In your case, Venus rules that Taurus area of the global audience, publishing, broadcasting, anything online. And so it comes back down here to the 6th house, which is the house of everyday work routine, practical work and service. That may have a connection to everything online, like I said. But so you have this opposition between the 6th house and the 12th house. And the 12th house is, like I explained, is all those things that are hidden and secret and behind the scenes, whereas the 6th house is the down-to-earth stuff. So your everyday work life, and I'm going to be telling you about something big when we look at your progressions, because this is the new energy for you here, is this group, community, Aquarius energy. And that's about things that are different It's about organizations, groups, community, friends. And it's also connected to this creative expression that you have. And your moon is the planet, well, we call the moon a planet, even though it's a satellite. The moon is the ruler of your 11th house. That's also a lot like Aquarius. So it's about, so this opposition you have between the moon and Venus, it's all connected to group, friends, community, organizations, where you express and create. Now, there is an opposition. I don't think it's a bad opposition, though, but you do have an opposition between your needs, your feelings, what you want, versus your desires of Venus. So your desires are going to be more like the Aquarius. You're going to have a desire for work and service for others and community and friends and groups and more intellectual energy. So Venus in Aquarius, it's different. And even Venus also, like I said, represents women and you're kind of like a romantic pleasure energy as well. So for you, having Venus in Aquarius, even your like marriage, partnership, and your romantic life, it has to have a good foundation of friendship, being really intellectual and communicative and friendly and respectful with your, so like building a love relationship on a friendship and then taking it to the next level. But you have opposition between, that because the moon in Leo, it's not so much about, so like, for example, Aquarius is intellectual. It's detached a little bit. It's stepping back and looking at things objectively, which is a strong desire for you in a work context with group, friends, and community. But the moon in Leo is it's more passionate. It's more fiery and instinctive, and it can be a little more dramatic at times than the more intellectual side. So you have this opposition between this emotional, instinctive nature of things versus an intellectual, objective, so you have to find balance between those two polarities as well. And then also find balance between what's behind the scenes and hidden versus what's practical and down to earth and service and work. So I hope that resonates and makes sense for what I'm saying here. And technically, it's even like a grand cross, but it's really even a T-square that you have from Moon to this Uranus and your Venus to Uranus, which it has that connection to this communication that I was telling you about with Scorpio. That's tabooish, that's different, outside the box from normal. Also, Uranus is inconsistent. So any kind of messages or communications that you pick up on, it may not be always like just solid and straightforward and on time, or it could have breaks or gaps or inconsistency of some kind in the message. But even your feelings, your emotions have a connection to that in kind of a hard way, because it's a little bit of a dramatic energy too. The communications could get dramatic, I suppose, because usually Leo and Scorpio squares can get pretty dramatic at times. But then the intellectual part wants to not make it as dramatic with Venus in Aquarius. So it's definitely some tension with that communication. But again, the older that you get, you probably have learned to work with it more and more and more. And then you have Pluto and Libra in the second house of money. So your money planet is also Venus, because Venus rules your second house of Libra. So you can make money through relationships, one-on-one connections, and which comes back down to this group, community, work, service energy, and then expressing yourself passionately, creatively, involved in all that as well. But you do have a lot of power within money potential, but it has been going through, you're not at your best with that money power yet. You've just been going through a major transformation this last couple of years in your life, it feels like. We're going to be looking at all that next here in a second, but you do have the ability to have a lot of power within your relationships and money and resources, and a transformation to your values, your money throughout the years. Your financial life could definitely go through big transformations potentially there. All right. So anyway, we could go on and on about the birth chart. I tell this to everybody, but limited here on time, because astrology is never ending. You could spend a lifetime studying your own personal chart, There's always more to learn. But let's start moving on here to some other stuff. I want to start with your progress chart because this is huge. This is very rare. So the progressions is a 30-year cycle, and we get a few of these 30-year cycles in a lifetime, depending on how old we live to be. Every 30-year cycle is going to be rooted in a certain type of vibe, an energy, an area of your life that's going to dominate those 3 decades. And so what I see for you is that you're actually at the last 6 months of your last 30-year cycle, and you're preparing to start a brand new progressed new moon, which is going to be a brand new beginning for the next 30 years of your life, rooted in a different energy. And so what I see here, when I put your progress chart to your natal chart, we see that you're roughly about 5 months away, 5.5 months away from your new moon. So that's going to put you, having this fresh new cycle start in 2022. Right now, you're in the dark moon phase, where the moon is behind the sun, the last few months of that old cycle. And then the moon moves forward, and then you have that progressed new moon, which is a new beginning. But with that said, progressions, it's such a big context of 30 years that it's not like right when you have that new moon, it's not like the day after everything changes. It's more of a gradual process of change and a new beginning that's gradually coming in. And the first 4 years of the new moon are the first 4 years of planting symbolic seeds of intentions for the long-term future. And not everybody knows that they're in a new moon phase, and so they're planting seeds whether they realize it or not. So the fact that you know this information, you can really help this process out by really focusing on your long-term future this next 4 years and planting those seeds of intentions for your life and what you want it to grow into and manifest. Because the way this works is you have the progressed new moon for 2022, and then the moon starts moving forward and it builds. Your life starts to wax and build into something new for the next 15 years. And then 15 years later, as the moon comes all the way around, you have a progressed full moon, which only happens every 30 years as well. And so that's the culmination. That's the high point. That's the flowering phase for all of your intentions that you're going to be planting the next 4 years. So the more you can narrow your focus, narrow your intentions on what you want to manifest for your long-term future, the better, that has to do it. Because other people that don't know about this, they may change their mind. They may set their mind to something the first 2 years and then change it, and the next 2 years try to start something different. That's going to not put as much energy into that narrowed stream to make it at its best. So the more consistent this next 4 years you can be with your intentions, your plans, looking at your long-term future and where you want to go, the better you can manifest what you are trying to start. And, the moon, you can't, even when we have a new moon up in the sky in transits every month, you can't see the moon on a new moon because it's next to the sun. So you're still not getting the results. Normally it takes maybe 2, 3 to 4 years later, as the moon is moving forward, it starts to get the light, the symbolic light on it. And so it starts to build, and more light, more and more results for your life showing in this new way, as you move forward year by year. But you can't expect to see all the new results right away. That's my point. It takes time because this is a big cycle. Now, your new moon is rooted in Aquarius, which is your 6th house. So this is interesting because your sun has already been progressing through Aquarius for the last 26 and a half years. So you've been doing this Aquarius energy for quite some time already. And you've already been putting a lot of focus on the 6th house, which is the group, the community, the work, the service. It's also a health house. So your sun started here in Capricorn, about 14 degrees of Capricorn when you were born. So roughly 16, when you were about age 16, is when your sun first came into Aquarius. And it's been there for the last, 26 and a half years roughly. So in a way, you've already had this energy, but now with the new moon being right there, your whole next 30 years are actually rooted in this Aquarius energy, which is the group, the community, the intellectual energy, the friendships, the communications, the work, the service, and either for yourself or some sort of a connection is a health connection too. This is a new beginning for your health for the next 30 years. And so that's maybe a more personal side of it, where it would be good to start a new health routine this next 4 years for your long-term future in some way. And I see that actually in the transits as well. So I think it's speaking about both health and work. That's now coming into something new here in a bigger way for the long-term future. But like I said, you've already had a connection to it in some way, but this is just something new that's coming in now. And it's also next to your south node of that ancient energy, of the past life energy that I was telling you about. So what's going to happen, even though your next 30 years are rooted in Aquarius, what's going to happen is your moon is going to come into Pisces and start building through Pisces for 2.5 years. That's going to be towards the end of 2022 is when it comes into Pisces. So for 2.5 years, that's your partnership energy. But your sun is going to also change signs in the coming years. And it's going to be, so it looks like it's going to be about 3.5 years from now, your sun will change signs and progress into Pisces. And you're going to be progressing through Pisces for 30 years, starting in about 3.5 years from now. So anytime that the sun changes signs and progressions, it's rare, and it shows a change of focus, a change of purpose, a change of identity, and something new. So in a way, it's like, it's complicated because you're rooting it in Aquarius, which you've already had this connection to, the group, the community, and work and service, and the intellectual and all that. But your long-term future is still going to be this Pisces energy as your identity moves into that. And what's interesting about it is in 3.5 years, when your sun moves into Pisces, it's right on that past life energy that you have such a strong connection to, where you're, again, like I was explaining, you're meant to work with it in a practical way in this life and take it down to earth and all that. But I don't know, it's like maybe by that point, the next 3.5 years, as you develop yourself in this new way with work, I feel like maybe you've come full circle. Maybe you've completed that balancing between those two polarities of, Pisces and Virgo. But Pisces is also the partners and other people. So your long-term future is going to be focused on partnership and other people in those Pisces realms for decades into the future. But this is huge because it's a new beginning of energy, which, like I said, is rare. It only happens every 30 years. The other thing I see is that your ascendant has reached your Pluto for the first time in your life. And Pluto is about transformation, and the ascendant is about the self. So you've also reached a very rare point for a major life transformation, it feels like, in a new way for yourself that's coming into the picture now. And your Mercury, which is you, Mercury rolls, like I said, it rolls you and it rolls your career. Well, your Mercury has been in Pisces for years as well already. So your Mercury started in Capricorn. It went all the way through Capricorn in your early years. Then it went all the way through Aquarius for many years. And then it went into Pisces, which is the partner, which is the metaphysical, the spiritual, the psychic, intuitive energy. And your Mercury will be there for years into the future as well. And it's really focused on the partnership. So you, Mercury, have reached a critical point in partnership, which could be related to the children situation, because your Mercury naturally has a connection to children, the creative business. It's now connected to the partner as well. Yeah. We also see that your north node and your south node have changed signs by progression. Now your north node is at 29 degrees of Leo. So it does feel like you've completed this balancing between Virgo and Pisces of how to make the psychic intuitive energy practical and down to earth and bring that down to the earth, But now, North Node of Destiny is pointing towards Leo, which is that expressing energy. The 29th degree of Leo and even 0 degrees of Virgo is right where we have a fixed star of royalty. It's actually a really positive fixed star right there. The 29th degree is known as one of the most famous degrees there is. And so what this would indicate is that at this point in your life, and I think it's already been there for a little bit, is that you're supposed to really express yourself and get attention, get recognition, get the spotlight. Although for you, it's behind the scenes, so maybe more in a communicative way. But you're definitely meant to shine bright, get attention, get recognition, and have some form of royalty coming in this next era of your life. We also see that your career point has progressed to 24 degrees of almost 25 degrees of Cancer, and you can see this blue line right to your Uranus in that communication house, which means that your career has a perfect alignment now with that Uranus, that taboo communication that's deep, that's hidden, secret stuff, what's under the surface and private and, all that. So you can channel that tabooish communication into your professional life in an easier way in your older years here, I believe, than you could have when you were a lot younger. All right, so that's just generally the progress chart of where you are in the big picture. You're starting this brand new cycle. And so your energy has actually been waning for the last 15 years. And now in about 5.5, 6 months from now, when you have that new beginning officially, the moon waxes for 15 years. Your life starts to build into something new, showing more and more results year after year, connected to work and partnership stuff. So that's great. Now, with that said, let's take a look at your transits, because I see big stuff here as well. So on this chart, I have the transits on the outside wheel of your birth chart. I mainly focus on the slower moving stuff because the inner stuff happens every year. It's not that big of a deal. It's more of the daily life stuff. I tend to focus more on the bigger picture stuff that doesn't happen very often. So let me just take a quick look at this. You do have some rare stuff. In a way, well, so, okay. So what I do see is you're at the Neptune square Neptune phase of life, which everybody goes through in their early 40s. And this is a part of what we call the midlife transition transit. Some people call it the midlife crisis transits, but it doesn't always mean crisis. It's just a change. It's a big change from your first half of life to your second half of life that you're headed for. And Neptune is about Neptune has a sense of like the reality of other things that are outside of the earth reality. Like I was saying, it's our blind spots, it's the metaphysical, the spiritual, it's illusions, it's fantasies, it's just all those other dimensional things. And having Neptune square Neptune phase means that reality is changing now. The reality, whether it's true reality or not, of your past, it's different now in this new era. You're coming into a new era basically where the realities are changing, life is changing, the way the world works is changing. The world is not the way it was when you were growing up in the 80s and the 90s and stuff. This is different now, and it can add a little bit of tension to the psyche and to reality and, understanding how reality is kind of changing in some sort of a way now. There could also be a little bit of tension, and this can be very subtle. Not everybody is aware of this aspect because Neptune is it's foggy. It's not the clear area. It's not like detailed, logical mind thinking. This is more stuff that's kind of, I don't know, it's hard to see, hard to understand. You've also had like blind spots and or fantasies, imagination, dreams connected to home and family stuff. And now with Neptune in your partnership house, there's like a change of reality, or something is changing between the home and the family and the partner that you're having to kind of work with in a new way, it feels like. But Neptune is actually moving through your partnership house. And Neptune came into Pisces back in 2011. So it's been there for quite a long time. And transit Neptune, this is a once-in-a-lifetime transit, because this Neptune is a 164-year cycle. So this is rare. Since 2011, there's been a new energy that's connected to you. And it's only temporary, although kind of long-lasting. But what's been happening is transit Neptune has been opposing all of your Virgo since 2011 from the partnership house. But it's also enhancing all the metaphysical, spiritual, psychic, intuitive energy as well. And your partner, this would indicate that your partner is going to be someone that's also spiritual, metaphysical, dreamy, imaginative, creative, new age perhaps, or wrapped up in this, more of the spiritual, psychic, energy going on. It even fits astrology and metaphysics. So it's really connected to your partners, and also other people in your life have that strong connection. So it is affecting your life, but it's coming from other people mainly. But you've definitely been under the influence of this Neptune transit since 2011, and you have a little bit longer left, another few years left of that transit, where this is like the peak of the otherworldly type of energy. Like, this is huge for all that kind of stuff. But it's also, whether you're recognizing it or understanding it or not, there is some tension on these new realities and what's real, what's not real, trying to figure things out in that way. This may not resonate as much for you because, again, it can be very subtle and under the surface. But that's one rare transit that I see for you. And, it's also like you may not see, are you seeing your partner clearly, or your partner could be caught up in a movement of some kind that may not be there forever, because once Neptune leaves Pisces, it's going to change a little bit of this metaphysical, spiritual energy that's been building up since 2011, basically. This is like the peak of the new age, the spiritual, metaphysical, astrology, like even astrology and the tarot and all that. It's really taken off since 2011 because of this Neptune in Pisces transit. So once Neptune leaves that, like even astrology isn't going to be as popular as it has been because of this energy. So things will definitely be changing after 2025 for the world when it comes to what's real, reality, philosophy, belief systems. There's also a lot of belief systems in this era that aren't necessarily true. A lot of culture stuff that's just kind of weird, and it's just kind of a weird time. And it is affecting you on some level, whether that be something that you see clearly or not. But that's just temporary. That's square. Now, the other thing going on here is that, well, what I see is that Jupiter has been moving through Aquarius all of 2021 for the first time in 12 years. And so Jupiter's been moving over your Venus and opposing your moon all of this year from the 6th house. So Jupiter tends to want to expand and grow things. So Jupiter in your 6th house, which is your health house, but it's also your daily work life routine. It's the group, community, friends, communications, the intellectual. And Jupiter's trying to expand something for your work for the long-term future. And remember what I just showed you in your progress chart. That's right where you have this big new beginning for your everyday work life that's starting in some new way for the long-term future. But it still has a connection to things that you've already been doing too. But Jupiter now wants to expand the group, the work, the community energy to the next level. And like I said, this is rare. It's a 12-year cycle. So you're not going to have this support from Jupiter here for another 12 years. So you got to take advantage of this energy that's really pointing you towards a new beginning for your everyday work life and work routine that's going to have a long-lasting result based on what you're doing now. Now, Jupiter is only a 12-year cycle, so you are going to be expanding, this new work, community, group, friends, stuff for the next 12 years, but Saturn is a 30-year cycle, and now Saturn is in Aquarius as well. So this means that it's even bigger than Jupiter. It's connected to this 30-year cycle, and then Jupiter and Saturn together, that's a 20-year cycle. So there's like multiple cycles within cycles for your everyday work life that's starting in some new way here that you need to build. And Saturn is saying that you need to restructure your everyday work life. Wherever Saturn goes is where you have to put in the work. And because Saturn only moves through here every 30 years, it's pointing towards working on the practical work life. The daily routine life needs to be updated and changed. But there's some issues. It's a challenge because what this is saying is that there's actually a square up in the sky between Uranus and Saturn of Aquarius and Taurus. And so you're about to have a once in a lifetime transit here for 2022, because what's going to happen is Saturn is going to move forward and move over your Venus and oppose your moon for 2022. But Uranus is going to square your Venus and square your moon. So you are caught up, especially next year, in this battle between the new and the old, the past versus the future, the status quo versus doing things differently, changing things. And so this change wants to happen for your work life and your health life, but the change may not be easy at first. It may be this back and forth. It may be just a little bit of a pull. That's not necessarily easy to create the changes. You need to restructure something in your everyday work life, in your everyday routine life to get something new that's better, that's different, that's alternative. So what I see here is that your status quo of how you work needs to change, basically. And the Uranus part is coming into this ninth house. And this is huge because your ninth house of Taurus is where there's a lot of energy headed for. And so the North Node has been in Gemini. It's been pointing all of 2021. It's been pointing towards your professional life, saying it's time to update your professional life, update your long-term goals in this communication, networking type of way. And you've been asked to be developing that. And at the same time, the South Node has been in Sag. Now, this only happens every 18 and a half years. So the South Node has been moving through the home life this year, indicating that there's changes trying to take place between your professional life and your home life in a rare way. And some things need to change in the home environment to accommodate these changes. That could be for both work, your professional life, and home life changes. So there's been a lot of karma. There's been eclipses connected to your professional life and your home life that are creating these rare changes for the long-term future. But now the North Node is going to come in. Now the North Node is pointing towards your ninth house where Uranus is. And so it's saying for you that destiny is pointing you to develop and update this ninth house area, which, again, the ninth house rules everything above and beyond, teaching, learning. It rules spirituality. It rules foreign places, global audience. It rules publishing, broadcasting, putting a message out there to the world. So you're meant to update that in a new way, but it has to be different now with Uranus there. And Uranus typically is about technology. It's about everything different. And remember, your birth Uranus is in that third house of communications, in the tabooish deep area that you communicate about. So now, it feels like your work needs to change to accommodate some sort of a radical revolution in the form of either website stuff, online stuff, publishing, broadcasting, writing, speaking, even a performance or something, entertainment. But yeah, there's just something new that's trying to be updated. And as Uranus moves forward and squares your moon and squares your Venus next year, and let me just take a look at the timing for that, because that shows changes are on the way, more changes. And I think you've already been going through some changes. But, let's move it faster. Let's go by the month. Let me just take a quick look at when Uranus, well, okay. So Uranus will come into this area of change by May. And that's when the sun is in that 9th house area and the north node of destiny is there. And we're going to start having eclipses in your 9th house of Taurus. So it looks like you're going to see some new or better results for this change that's trying to happen for your work and online or something by next year. You know, February, March, April, May, I feel like are going to be powerful months for all that. This definitely looks like an important time of change. So it first squares your moon as well. So, let me add this chart to your natal chart to figure out. One second here. Okay. So yeah, here's Uranus squaring your moon, and it's not just a one-day event. This is like the beginning of the next year. So from the spring of 2022 all the way to the following year of 2023 is a process of change. So emotionally, you're going to be ready for something new because the moon represents your feelings and emotions and what you need, and you're going to feel changeable. You're going to have a little bit of something different happening here by next year, it feels like. I don't think it's a negative. I just think there's some tension involved in the changes of some kind. Emotionally, how you feel about things, your desires, and then also, Uranus will be moving forward and square your Venus at the same time period next year. And so that would indicate like changes in relationships, changes in groups and community, new people. There's some sort of new work development, it feels like, that's trying to come in. And by that point, Saturn is fully in your 6th house, saying that you definitely have to work on the restructuring. But we also see that Saturn is square your Uranus at this time period in May of next year, which is rare as well. And that would usually, again, indicate that there's major changes happening. So I don't know if you're planning on a change or if this is going to be a change that's thrown upon you unexpectedly or that you have to deal with in some way. But regardless, either it's about health or work. Now, I don't want you to worry about your health. If you don't see any health indications in your life right now, then that's great. But you may have to deal with some health stuff by next year. That's just a potential. I don't want you to stress or worry about it, though. I just want you to be prepared. Start taking precautions now. Start taking really good care of yourself. Make sure you're up on the good health, the good diet, the good vitamins, or whatever you got to do for yourself. And even if you see no health indications this next 2 years, you still are being asked to restructure how you take care of yourself, how you do health, and all that. Worst case scenario, there could be something that comes up that you have to deal with unexpectedly out of the blue or something with health. But if it's not about health, like I said, I still think no matter if you have a health issue or not, you have a need to just restructure it for the next 30 years of how you take care of yourself. But I think it's also speaking about work. A new work situation is trying to come in here, and you have to put in the work. You have to be patient with this process of development of something here, because it kind of takes a couple years for this change that's trying to happen for how you work and the way you work, to be coming in. And then we saw on a bigger level that progression that says it's for the next 30 years as well. So there's a lot of energy pointing towards your 6th house. What I like, though, is that this Uranus transit is in harmony with your sun for the first time ever this year and next year. It's been in harmony all of this year with you, which means you have the ability, you have the opportunity to be expressing yourself in a creative business in a new way, in a new form of some kind here that's alternative, that's different. And we also see that by next year, the south node will be on your Uranus and the north node will be opposite. So it's kind of like it's saying to perhaps channel this taboo-ish, unconventional, different, some people would even call it weird energy, that what's under the surface, what's hidden, and communicate it, but channel it into the world, the global audience, and not just the local level, but something that's above and beyond, or, websites, or, I know you already do that, but there's something new that's trying to be established. So hopefully you already know what that's about. And if you aren't planning on anything new happening this next couple of years in work, it's probably going to happen no matter what in some way here. So that's big. Now, the other big thing happening next year is Jupiter is going to be coming into Pisces, which is your partnership house. That only happens every 12 years. So there's a lot of big energy in your partnership house. So this could either indicate your partner is going through something big and a new development for her own personal life, or it could be, something in partnership that's expanding, that's growing bigger, and Jupiter's going to meet up with that Neptune energy, which has never happened in our lifetimes before. So in Pisces. So all the metaphysical, the spiritual, the psychic, intuitive energy, astrology, tarot, all those types of things are going to be at their biggest next year. Also next year, 2022, is going to be one of the best years for any kind of production energy, producing something. Now for you, this is in the context of partnership. So it could either be with your main partner, some sort of a production energy, a producing of something by next year that's coming out in a bigger way, or it could be business partners or something with other people, but it's connected to other people in your life. There's bigger energy coming out in more of the metaphysical realms for 2022. And then also Jupiter will dip into Aries next year, which is your 8th house of other people's money, other people's resources. So you'll likely start to get a financial boost from these changes that are trying to happen in your work life. Okay, so that's huge. That's a major thing. And the eclipses, we're going to start having our eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio, which is your 3rd house and your 9th house axis, the communication axis, the learning, teaching axis, publishing, broadcasting. You could also even write, publish something or something like that, or speak, communicate. It's just, there's going to be shakeups. There's going to be major changes in your communications and what you're doing here, it feels like. And it's a process that doesn't just instantly change. It's a process for the rest of this year and all of next year that is changing something here. But you're being asked to focus on the global connection and not just the local level. It's more about, like I said, online or having that global connection around the world. That's the area that's most supported in this next couple of years for you. So what I think, that it is some sort of a new era for you for work and what you do, and then for your health as well. And the partnership energy looks good, like I said, with Jupiter coming there for 2022. So a lot of the biggest stuff is on the side of other people in your life. So you also have Pluto in the 5th house, a transformation to a creative business. Well, that's been building up for years already. There is a little bit of a shadow still in Capricorn, but you've already dealt with the worst of it. But the good news is Pluto has been in harmony with all of your Virgo for all these years. It hasn't been a terrible transit for you like it has been for other people, I don't think. But Pluto is in harmony with your Saturn for the very first time. So you're also maybe a transformation to your commitments from the house of children, from the creative business house. So you actually have support to have an easier sort of a transformation process for both creativity, fun, joy, children, recreation, business, creative business. So, yeah, I think the biggest news is the Uranus square your moon and square your Venus for 2022. And again, that's a once in a lifetime scenario there. So it's rare, and it's most likely a big change of some kind. I hope you already know what it's about, but it feels like it's about a creative online thing or work and people, relationship stuff, friends, group, community stuff that's changing in a major way. But even all this Uranus energy is in harmony with your Virgo, so I don't think it's going to be a negative. I think it's new opportunity to do things differently. And that's the little bit of the challenge that you might be faced with this year or next year is, again, how to do things differently, but also be responsible and mature and, maintain commitments or wrap up commitments of the past so you can do something new and different, or letting go of the status quo so you can create bigger changes. That's kind of the dynamic of the new versus the old. And you still have a connection to the past, the old stuff that you have to finalize, wrap up, restructure in order to create this bigger change. So that's pretty much the big energy of what I see. And also all the big energy in your home and family life that's been developing is now going to be moving away from that. So I feel like your home life has already gone through changes. Your family life has already been going through changes. You're at the end of that process now, and you're moving into new changes in different ways for 2022 and beyond. So I think work, you can't expect your work to be at its biggest right now. Like I said, 15 years from now, you're going to have a peak. You're going to have a flowering phase for everything that you're setting up right now. And I know 15 years sounds like a long time, but it's not like you're still going to have positive results and see new things that are building from now until then. But in 15 years from now, your sun will be in Pisces, and you're going to have a Virgo full moon on your ascendant. It's going to be one of the most powerful highlights and biggest moments of your life in 15 years for everything that you're working on now. So you're going to see more and more results, more and more recognition, more and more success for this new era for your work the next 15 years. And you're still going to be relatively young by that point too. So it's a new era for you. And I think it's going to be positive. And the future is going to have much more work too, because, Jupiter is eventually going to, in 2023, Jupiter will be in that Taurus area, really expanding that stuff that's trying to be established now and next year. And then the following year, 2024, Jupiter will move across Gemini, which is your professional life. It'll be expanding your work, your career, your reputation even more in the communication realms. So this next several years is just nonstop building up in this new life. All right, Rob, I don't want this report to get too long. I still have to do your wife's report next. So I'm going to wrap this up. I hope that, gave you some insights. I hope that you found it accurate and made sense. And I'll be taking a look at your partner's chart next, and I'll send these both at the same time. All right. Thanks, Rob. You take good care.